talk about Devarim, Chayim, Chesed. Now, on your handout of our scripture sources and other sources, it actually says Devarim Chayim. And then after I printed it and I was looking at the second verse that's on here, Proverbs 31:26, right in the middle, I noticed this is really about Eshes Chayil, which we've been studying, right? Only, of course, this verse is 26, and we haven't gotten there yet, but Proverbs 31:26 says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness, Chesed. So really this should be Devarim Chayim v'Chesed, words of life and kindness. And as I was saying before, I just want to make a public announcement that I was requested to do this talk, and kind of like, you know, where it has those TV shows where it gives like a disclaimer at the beginning, like none of the following events pertain to any specific individual. Okay, so since we're going to be talking about gossip and slander and what women don't do very well, I just want it really understood. I'm not talking about anybody in this room or who might be listening or might be watching.
Of course.
That's my disclaimer. Nothing in the following is meant to pertain to any particular person that I'm talking about in code. Okay? Because sometimes we can do that. You know how they do that on Facebook? That's my pet peeve. I have a whole blog that I'm doing on social networking and Facebook and things you don't really do, and they're just plain rude. But you know when they put in the status bar this cryptic comment that is obviously referring to somebody out there who knows what they mean, but nobody else does? Okay, this is not one of those. But this is part of our study of Eshes Chayil, Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. We're going to be focusing on some of those words, wisdom, tongue, and the law of kindness. I got inspired during the service today and ended up coming with a whole bunch of other background, which I don't have a handout for you yet, but it will be on the website by next time. And so I wanted to sort of share with you where I come from when I'm thinking about this topic, because I come from it thinking about it as a clinical psychologist, but also obviously as a believer and also as a woman, specifically a female believer. And so I wanted to first define Chesed, and which means goodness, kindness, faithfulness. It's not on your handout. And don't worry too much about taking notes, because like I said, I have it all written down. It's just, it ended up in the computer this morning and there was no printer around. So goodness, kindness, faithfulness, loving kindness, and mercy. That's how Strong's defines it. It's used, first of all, as zealousness or ardor of man to man, especially towards the misfortunate. Or it refers to the piety of man towards God. And finally, it refers to the grace, favor, and mercy of God towards man. Now, Chayim, of course you guys know, means life. So we're going to be talking about words of life. So the first part of this background or introductory material is called Made in His Image, God's Plan. And so if we think about Genesis, we learn a couple of things about human nature. And this is where, as I will be presenting next time on the communication model, I teach this to people so people will just understand how we as human beings work, okay? And of course, as a believer, I believe we work this way because God made us this way. That make sense? Okay. So the first thing to notice about Genesis is when we're made in God's image, we are given a very important attribute that we do not share with the animals. What is that?
Soul.
Okay, soul. But what else about our capabilities, in terms of what our brain can do, our body can do that animals cannot do?
Choice.
Yes and no, because animals are capable of some choice.
Oh.
Okay, we're talking about language.
Oh, language.
Language.
Woof, woof.
The biggest way in which we differ from animals is language.
We can express themselves.
Now, chimpanzees can learn language. Dogs can be taught English and can understand what the words mean. Some of them are amazing at that. And animals, in a sense, have their own language, their nonverbal language, and so forth and so on. It's even considered that dolphins actually have a developed language. But in terms of being made in the image of God, they do not have speech. They do not have speech the way that we do. Their brains are not developed for language the way ours are. Ours are much, much bigger. God made our brains bigger because it had to incorporate so much more that we do, and part of the so much more, the most distinctive thing about that, when I was thinking about this morning, is speech. So when we're made in God's image, language is one of the ways that we're made in God's image that's very, very important, that determines our humanity, right? And think about it, because of speech, because of communication, that just like, oh my gosh, that creates all sorts of other possibilities in terms of culture and science and technology and whatever, and how we communicate information. You think about look at how the World Wide Web has transformed our world, because we've taken that speech and we've taken it into the digital age, and now we communicate digitally and we communicate internationally and we communicate instantaneously, and you see just the huge mushrooming of technology and knowledge that's happened as a result. To such an extent that in some ways society, people are more and more becoming as if they were gods, right? If you think about it. So, you know what I mean? In terms of our own pride and our own accomplishments and our own inventions and something. We're doing stuff that, I was just thinking the other day that, just working on my computer, if somebody in the Middle Ages had seen that, I would have been hung up as a witch, because it would be considered supernatural, i.e. only the realm of God to make words appear on a flat screen, right? It would be magic.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
So we're made in the image of God in terms of our use of language. Like God, our words are very, very powerful. They are creative. They are a creative energy. God created all things through His spoken word. Well, that's what we read about in Genesis right at the beginning, right? Through His word, He spoke everything into being. Our words similarly create reality. Now, I'm not talking about the word of faith movement. Speak it, get it, people. I'm not talking about a theology that says that just by virtue of speaking it in God's name or by some formula that God, as if we are uttering an incantation, has to then bow to our will and give us what we've asked for. That's not what I'm talking about, right? I'm sure you guys know that. And yet, it's interesting that when you read Kabbalah and when you read some of the sages and their interpretation of Torah, they talk a lot about the power of God, of our words to create. And it almost starts sounding like some of the Word of Faith preachers. It's pretty uncanny. I'll try and find some examples to bring you next time. And that, by the way, was pointed out to me by my husband Mitchell. He said, wow, this stuff really sounds like, some of those TV preachers. Okay, so psychology, in effect, has said much the same, that our words are so powerful. And one of the ways you can see that is when we look at both the psychological and the physiological effects of negative versus positive communication. It basically fires different areas of the brain, okay? And you've heard about that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me? Not true.
Right.
Okay? One of my little biographical snippets is when I was in the 6th grade, the 5th grade, I was bullied and teased terribly by my peers because I was very smart, and I spoke in words. Funny, that association just came to me now. I spoke in words that they did not understand. My vocabulary was huge because I was an only child and I was reading science fiction at the age of 10, Isaac Asimov and all this kind of stuff. And I would speak in words. They had no idea what I was saying, and so I was different, and they used to make fun of me, and that's what my mom told me to say. But it's not true. Now, I was 40 before, through a procedure in psychology called EMDR, I finally healed from those childhood experiences. I was 40. So for 30 years, I carried around the effects of the words that they said to me. So our words are extremely powerful. In some ways, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, is way more damaging than physical abuse. You know, most kids clearly know. I mean, there are some distortions that happen with children that they blame themselves for getting hit, blah, 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 blah. But basically, we usually clearly know we're not supposed to get hit. But verbal and emotional abuse is so subtle and so literally mind-bending. Its damage comes from the fact that it gives us certain beliefs about ourselves that we hang on to. The earlier the abuse, the more deeply embedded these beliefs. The beliefs are stored very deeply in the brain. They're attached to the feelings and the pain caused by those words, and they are often very hard to change despite subsequent information about ourselves. So do you know of maybe in your own, you don't have to tell me, but in your own history or somebody else's history, where somebody was given a message, like maybe that 10, they were fat. They were literally had a child obesity problem. And then when things were corrected, they were beautiful within 3 years. They were like awesome. And then 5, 7, 8, 10 years down the road, they look in the mirror and they still say, I'm fat. And they feel bad about how they look. And it doesn't matter what anybody says to them. That first, that image in the mirror that was there, and the words, the hurtful words of other people, making them feel self-conscious at a tender age, are like seared, they're like stamped into the cellular nature of your brain. Your brain never forgets anything. Did you know that? Not anything. They did some experiments in the forgive me, the 60s, I think, or maybe the 70s. Dr. Penfield, who's a Canadian up in Montreal, got permission to do some experiments when he had to do some brain surgery in some patients. The patients, I don't know if you know, but most of the time in brain surgery, patients are awake because the brain inside, once you get past the skull and stuff, doesn't have any pain, doesn't have any nerves for pain. So they can actually do the brain surgery with the person awake. And they want the person awake because they want to make sure that they're not destroying areas of the brain that they didn't mean to be hurting. And so he did some experiments where he would take an electrode and he would specifically stimulate a certain group of cells. And the person would report, oh my goodness, you know, it's the 3rd grade and the teacher is saying this, and this. And this is the smell I can smell, and so is dropping his pencil over there, and the color of the person's blouse in front of me is such and such. I mean, it was just like that. It was just like playing a video back. That is in our brain. You realize that we only use 10% of our brain on a daily basis. What's the other 90% for? Okay? Our brain is the most amazing computer that God ever invented. Okay, it stores everything. Its hard disk is immense. The problem is that we can't always access the information that's there, but it's still there. And that's one understanding about what the unconscious is. You know, you've heard about the unconscious and Freud and blah, blah, blah. And they go, this is sort of off topic, but my husband tells this true story of when he was working in a bagel store in New York, and the mother of the bagel store owner was this old Jewish lady. And she comes into the shop one day, and, you know, he's making the bagels at 4 in the morning or whatever. And she says, so, you know, you're going to college, that's great, what are you studying? He says, I'm studying psychology. And she goes, oh, psychology? She goes, that's just a bunch of bunk. If I had an unconscious, I would know it. You got it? Got the show? The point is, the definition of unconscious is we don't know it, right? We can't access it. Anyway, so, but deep in our unconscious, the stuff that we may not access directly, all the words that were ever spoken to us are stored. That's pretty heavy. Along with the feelings of the time and the beliefs that those words caused us to have about ourselves and how we saw our relationships and the world. And right there, you have the key to sometimes when we have these real emotional blocks when we're trying to get closer to us. Because there's these, I think of it as it's like programming that gets put in at an early age, and then it gets walled off. But you know how on the computer you can have viruses and they're running these programs in the background? You can't see them, but you can see the effects of it. And that's just how it's like in our brain. It's like we have these old programs of a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 13-year-old, and they're running in the background, and they're messing up, you know, current time, because these old programs on old programming from the point of view of a 5-year-old are still functioning from the point of view of a 5-year-old. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's this software that gets programmed into our brain through what? Language. Not just language, also physical experience and so forth and so on. But it is through language that we often access. We can access it some other ways, but it's the beliefs, the things we tell ourselves in the back of our brain. I would think of it as this tape that runs all the time about these beliefs about ourselves and our relationships in the world and our future and so forth and so on. We have this tape and it's playing all the time. And sometimes that programming is old. The programming is there because of why? Because of the messages we received when we were young. Okay? And sometimes just situations that we misunderstood when we were younger as well. When I was thinking about this morning, we were talking about Jacob and Esau and told the parsha for today, and I was thinking about that whole idea of names. You know, isn't it interesting that the first thing that God had Adam do is what? Use his ability for language to name the animal. Isn't that interesting? That's the first thing he asked him to do, to name the animal. Right? So there's this significance in names in Judaism that sometimes escapes us in English. Okay? I wasn't named Catherine, which is my legal name, because I think it means, I'm trying to think now. Irina is dove, and I think Catherine is peace, or the other way around. Eventually my name translates into dove of peace. But the point is, my parents didn't name me because of the meaning of the name. They named me because it started with a C, and so did my husband's name. My father's name started with a C. And they like Catherine. But in Judaism, in contemporary Judaism, children are often named for a relative that is older and deceased, or an older relative. But generally speaking, there is some significance to the actual name in terms of what it means. So, when the angel says to Mary, and his name shall be Yeshua, because he will save his people from his sins. All right, what is the meaning of Yeshua? Salvation. Okay, so in Toldo, in the Parsha today, you have it's not today, but you have Jacob's name being changed to Israel, right? And so his name is changed from the usurper to Prince with God. What do you think that did for his self-image? What do you think that did for his self-image? Names are powerful. Language is powerful. It affects who we believe that we are. And because we tend to operate out of that place in all the decisions we make, it becomes very powerful, the idea of names. And we see it over and over again in Scripture. You know, Abram becomes Abraham, and you know, Yeshua's name, and the whole naming of John, of Yohanan, who came before Yeshua. You know, there's all these. You know, there could be a whole study in itself. It's just to track the people whose names have changed in Scripture and see how that was symbolic for something that also changed in their life. So let's look at a little bit more closely at this idea that we're created in His image. Genesis also says, male and female He created them. He didn't just have two guys. Sorry, maybe I'm politically incorrect. He didn't have two women. He didn't just clone a woman. He didn't just clone the man. He specifically made men and women, and He specifically made them different. And my husband is fond of saying that, why would God create the hardware different, but the software the same? Right? And he said that because he had these wonderful friends, Jewish friends of his, not believing, and they were, you know, very kind of liberal-minded, very New Age, you know, and they had their daughter first, and then they had their son, and the mom couldn't get over how different they were, even though she felt like she treated them just the same. You know, let him play with babies and the whole thing. The only thing is, when he got the baby, he was walking around whapping up other babies on the head with it, right? And she's like, how does this happen? I didn't teach him how to do that. But even given the same toy, you know, and that's when Mitchell said to her, well, what do you think? You think God would create the hardware different, but the software exactly the same? No. We have different software. Our brains are pre-programmed differently, okay? One of the things that we know from psychological research is that females develop language sooner. We talk, as a general group, mind, you know, obviously there are individual differences, but as a general group, we develop language sooner, we develop more words, we put sentences together sooner, okay? Now, think of your typical 2-year-old, right? One of the reasons they get frustrated is why?
They can't explain, they can't verbalize what they want.
Right, they can't express what they want. Because part of emotional maturity is that we're able to take our feelings and put them into words instead of actions. Okay, that's one definition of emotional maturity. We can use our words instead of hitting somebody over the head, right? Okay, so imagine, now knowing those two pieces of information, putting them together, all right, that means that girls are a little bit more able to deal with their feelings, okay? They actually achieve emotional maturity sooner. Think about it. Is a 13-year-old girl the same emotional maturity level as a 13-year-old boy? No way, okay? And you see that really early on, you know, even you know, as kids are growing up, you'll see that at a certain age, boys, when they're angry, will tend to hit first. They'll tend to be very physical in their expression of their feelings. Maybe not yours.
No, I was like agreeing.
Oh, you're agreeing? But girls will be mean with their tongue. They will call names. They will, I mean, think about all the drama at school. Oh, my God. And you sisters are laughing, right? In your house, right? We have several sisters, 3 sisters here. There's a couple missing, but. So you see in that development of language, they're putting their feelings into words sooner, right? So they kind of emotionally mature sooner, but they can also be nastier on an emotional verbal level, right? Because when they're aggressive, girls tend to put it into words, and boys will just clock the other guy. You know? And you know what? The fight will get broken up, and then they'll go and be best friends or whatever. But the girls, oh my gosh, they're going to be talking about it for months, right? They are not going to let go of it. Am I hitting you where it hurts?
Emotionally mature.
Yeah. I said in general. Okay. There's some other factors, but think about it. The mom's role is to help children put words on their feelings. This is a very important concept that relates to what I'm going to be talking about next time. Okay, that whole process of putting words into feelings is mom's role. All right, and that's very important to notice because females are neurologically wired to notice and interpret nonverbal signals better. Why is that? Well, let's see. You have an infant who can't talk and they're just crying.
And you just know why.
And you just know. How do you know? How do you know?
You can tell.
How do you know why?
You just feel it.
You can just feel it.
You think
you
about
just have
your
these
day.
vibes.
They must be hungry. And sure enough, they're hungry.
Okay. So, but the point is that we're neurologically programmed to notice very subtle differences in their crying, their behavior. We're neurologically wired to be able to anticipate the needs of a child that cannot talk. Okay? Just as a little aside, translate that into male-female relationships. I do this with couples all the time. Okay, so the woman is pre-programmed to anticipate needs. Is the guy? No. So guess what? He ain't going to figure it out by himself. Okay? Hints don't work. All right? He's not going to figure it out by himself. He's not going to be just automatically anticipating your need and figuring out that you're PMSing or that you've had a hard day. He's not going to notice the look on your face or your posture or your blah, 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 blah. Okay? They're non-verbally stupid. I don't know how else to say that.
I wouldn't put that on tape.
This is not a politically correct video. The point I'm saying is that men and women are wired differently.
Yes.
We are wired differently. When it comes to communicating, we are wired to pick up more subtle aspects of communication. I'm going to be touching on that next time. It's very, very important when understanding about communication because 97% of communication is nonverbal. It's not what we say. It's how we say it.